Challenge 5.
Into the heat of battle.
All right, so let me just get some things out here. Hang on. I just gotta set this up. It won't be long. Hang on. All right. Wait, stop. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. I got it. Hang on. Just a minute. God. Wait. No. Don't pull that. Don't stop. Stop. Okay. Hang on. No. Push that just a little bit to the left. Just a little to the left. Okay. That should be fine. Okay. Yeah. Open it back up. Not too shabby, huh? It takes a little effort to get these old cabs up and running, but it's worth all the love you put in. Anyways, lots of my knowledge about the game has come from watching a bunch of old matches and tournament footage, word of mouth, and hard time in training mode. For this lesson, I'm gonna teach you a few basics and useful things about playing as Ken, with his third and most commonly used super art, Shippujinrai Kyaku. Why Ken? Well, Ken is third strike. For starters, Ken is known to be a relatively good character. Is he the absolute best? I mean, there's a constant debate over who really has the top spot, but he's never unanimously been number one. Just really good. He has a bunch of tools for dealing with a bunch of different situations, and he has a few different confirms and combos that can lead into his most frequently used super. Playing and learning Ken will help you learn the general feel and speed of third strike, making it hopefully easier to transition over to other characters. My first year, probably more, of playing third strike was mostly spent playing Makoto. Honestly, I kind of regret that. I formed a lot of bad habits, and I think that kind of slowed my progress on learning the game in general, as opposed to if I just would have learned Ken first. What can I say? I saw Tominaga do the cool thing, and I wanted to do it too. Sue me. And in my defense, that's kind of one of the coolest parts of third strike. You can lose a whole bunch of matches and still come out looking sick just because you did something really flashy and technical. For the vast majority of everything I'm going to be showing you here, I'll be using a training mode for FBA, just to make things a little cleaner and more concise for you guys. Just keep in mind, there may be some text that hangs around a little bit too long or some numerical mistakes on the super meters. This is just a side effect of the training mode's infinite meters setting. Don't worry though, everything that you're gonna see here you can do just fine on any of the recommended versions to play that we just talked about. Those being FBA, Online Edition, 30th Anniversary, or my personal favorite, in Real Arcade. The characters on the screen may change every now and again, but that's just so I can show off some very specific things. We're almost always going to be Ken though, so if you ever see Ken on the screen, it should be something that you can follow along with and try to do as well. I'm gonna have a friend help me out so we can do a little movie magic with this training mode, but for you guys, you can always just go to your dummy setting and set it to record and replay any actions you'd like the computer to do. I personally prefer using a Real Arcade stick as my controller of choice for third strike, but I don't want to leave out those who aren't using the exact same controls as me either. Experiment with what control mappings work best for you with whatever controller you decide to use. You may end up changing your mind after we learn some useful tricks along the way anyhow. Feel free to experiment. Down here is a display of all of my inputs. It's an arcade style look, but the order is simply weakest to strongest for both punches and kicks, so hopefully it'll be easy enough to translate for other controllers. In this section up here, I'll be keeping notes about what we're currently talking about, extra information, and even displays of exactly what combo we're trying to do in the moment. Moving on, I want you to be able to understand things that are talked about with fighting games and understand some of the more nuanced things as we go. So let's get one of the most complicated things out of the way first and foremost. Frame data. Frame data is a term used for just about any fighting game that you can think of, so if you've been around any kind of fighting game space before, you've probably heard frame data mentioned once or twice. Frame data refers to the fine details associated with different actions and moves a character has. It's comprised of three important things: startup, active, and recovery frames. Startup being how many frames have to play before the attack will actually come out. The active frames being how many frames it's possible to hit the opponent with that attack. And the recovery frames being how long you have to wait until after the active frames finish before you can do another move. Now we're not gonna go back again and talk about version differences, so generally speaking, third strike runs at 60 frames per second, so every frame is 1/60th of a second. But let me stress, it isn't extremely important to know frame data. And you don't need to know frame data to be good at this game. The best, most legendary players grew up learning the games on arcade, and there wasn't any real way to deeply examine frame data then. They just got good. Knowing frame data and being able to understand frame data is really just helpful in knowing why situations work the way that they do, and being able to better understand when it's safe and unsafe to do certain things. I'll talk about more frame data as we go and whenever it's relevant, but if you're playing along with the video and you want to see more frame data specifically for Ken, I've linked the SRK wiki page for Ken down below. There's a couple different sources for finding frame data for Third Strike, but the SRK wiki is one of the most convenient ones. There's a few things that aren't completely perfect with the data, but for the most part, a lot of work has been put into this page and it's fairly trustworthy. And as we've said, it's not exactly crucial to know every bit of frame data anyway. Let's just get to the fun part, hitting some buttons. We're gonna start with the absolute basics of Street Fighter first. Standing still and hitting every button we've got, we can see all the moves attached to them. These are actually called normals. All of the different normals have different names, but we're gonna use the traditional name since this is an older game. They go like this: jab, strong, fierce for our punches, and short, forward, roundhouse for our kicks. Jab, strong, fierce, short, forward, roundhouse. These names came from some of the original arcade artwork that was on some old Street Fighter machines. You might see them online referred to as light, medium, and strong punches or kicks, respectively. Lots of veteran players still refer to normals with these names, so it's always a good idea to learn them. It might take some time to drill it in, but that's totally fine. And now for some movement options. Our directional inputs will let us walk back and forth, but we can also press up to jump. Street Fighter, and most fighting games, only ever use the cardinal and ordinal directions, that being up, down, left, and right, and up, left, up, right, down, left, and down, right. Since we're on the left side of the screen, if we hit up and right, we'll jump towards our opponent. If we hit up and left, we'll jump away from our opponent. You can also perform a super jump by quickly tapping down before you hit any of the jumping directions. If you happen to switch sides with your opponent, your character will automatically turn around to face them. Inputs, actions, and moves are relative to which direction you're facing your opponent, so you'll have to switch things up depending on which side of the screen you're on. Double tapping left or right will make you dash either towards or away from your opponent. Holding away from your opponent at this distance makes you back up, but holding away is also used for blocking high attacks if you're near or within range of an attack. Holding down and away will cause you to block low. Some high attacks can be blocked low, and some attacks that you would think are low can be blocked high. Sometimes it just depends on the character. For the most part though, it's pretty straightforward. If someone kicks your toes and you're not blocking low, you're gonna get hit. Also, keep in mind, blocking is meant to prevent you from taking a lot of damage, but it is possible to die while blocking an attack. This is called chip damage. While blocking saves you from taking big damage, Third Strike won't reward you too much for not taking a risk every now and again, or for not recognizing when you have an opening. You can hold back or down and back to block in the air, however. This is one big difference from the alpha games. Some characters also have more than one jump, or actions they can do during or only if they're jumping. Most characters also have varying speeds and properties to their dashes. And back to our buttons. Since we're Ken, if you hit forward, you'll get this move. If you hold back and hit forward, you'll get a different version of the move. This is known as a command normal, since we have to do something extra along with the button, but it's also not considered a special move. Ken's command normals are back or hold forward, hold towards the opponent and forward, hold towards the opponent and roundhouse, and you can also hold roundhouse here to fake it, meaning that you can make it miss the opponent if you want to. If you hit strong from this distance, you'll get this. If you hit it again while you're right next to your opponent, you'll get this instead. While not being considered a command normal, this is the difference between an attack that has different versions depending on the distance, far and close, respectively. Every normal also has a crouching normal that's very different. Ken's low roundhouse is actually considered a sweep, since it causes a knockdown. A knockdown is just that, knocking the person who's hit to the floor. The action of getting back up into a state where they can act again is a wake up. For some knockdowns, you can actually tap down just as your character is about to hit the ground for a quick rise. This could also be called teching the ground. If you hit both jab and short at the same time, you can grab. Grabs in Third Strike are usually pretty fast. Some characters have longer grab animations than others though. If you grab from a distance, it'll miss, obviously. Ken has a neutral, forward, and back throw, referring to what direction you hold when grabbing. Just about every grab causes a knockdown of some kind, some more advantageous than others. If you do a neutral grab, you can mash the buttons and shake the stick to speed up the grab. If you do the same grab but the opponent mashes instead, they can shake out of the grab faster. The grab will naturally end after a couple hits if neither one of you presses anything, but your opponent isn't gonna want to get hurt more, so mutually mashing out inputs during some neutral grabs is a pretty common tug of war. Some characters are also just missing certain throws. Chun-Li doesn't have a neutral, and Oro doesn't have a forward throw. Some characters also have air grabs. Some also have command grabs. Command grabs are actually considered special moves. They usually require a specific motion before pressing the right button to get out. You also can't mash out of a command grab if it connects like you can with a neutral grab. If both players hit a regular grab at the same time, they'll tech the grab, and neither person gets thrown or damaged. You also can't block grabs, though some command grabs can be blocked. Now moving over a bit, if you hit both strong and forward at the same time, you'll do the universal overhead. This input is exactly the same for every character, ergo universal. This attack will always hit opponents that are blocking low. Universal overheads can be blocked high, however. With this, if a majority of your attacks are blocked both high and low, you still have an option. Moving over one more time, hit Fierce and Roundhouse together, and you'll do a taunt. A really cool thing about Third Strike is that taunts actually have a real use. They usually give some kind of useful buff or stat change to your character. A really common one to see is Q's taunt. It's so important that Q players will often play in a way that makes sure they have time to taunt. Q's taunt increases his overall defense, so he'll take less damage in general. And Chun's taunt is random, and has different buffs depending on what action she just happens to do. Just about every character has some kind of unique property to their taunt. Ken's taunt increases his damage for either the next hit that connects, or the next entire combo if everything connects together successfully. This isn't stackable, so you can only do this one time for one buff on the next attack or combo. If you do the taunt and your next attack or a series of attacks gets blocked, you'll lose the buff after you disconnect. But if that does happen, you can just taunt again to activate the buff one more time and try again in the same round. This won't increase the damage for a throw, either. It has to be an attack. You're also left wide open when you taunt, so try to pick a good time to do them. I think that's about enough for single buttons for now. How about we get to doing some combos? Specifically, there's actually two different types of combos: links and chains. A link is when you connect one unique move with a completely different move. A chain is when you do the same move multiple times in a row, and it's also considered a successful combo. We've mentioned this before, but confirms are just that, putting on a move and using either the visual or audio cues that the move did in fact hit the other person, and reacting by doing something else. This is also useful for not doing something too. If you see or hear that your first few moves were blocked, then you can react by not following through with something that might end up leaving you open. Hear me out though, timing confirms, especially when you're just starting out, isn't the easiest thing in the world, and it's just one method of getting a combo, so don't worry about this too much for now. We'll talk about it again soon. For lots of combos, we're gonna want to mix in some special moves. Every character has their own special moves, but lots of them actually share the same inputs. Ken's special moves are Hadouken, or Fireball, Shoryuken, or DP, short for Dragon Punch, and the Tatsumaki, or Tatsu for short. If we're standing on the left side of the screen, player one side, the fireball is done by doing a quarter circle forward and a punch button. If you imagine your stick or your gamepad as a full circle, the motion we're doing is just that, tracing around 1/4 of the circle. This can only be done by starting in the down direction and ending with the direction leading towards your opponent. It's also possible to do the motion too slow too, so practice the timing if you need to. On the other hand, the Tatsu is done by doing a quarter circle back and then hitting a kick button. Again, if we're on the left side of the screen, we would start in the down position, curve into the down left position, and then end in left. The Tatsu is also one of the few special moves in the game that can be done after jumping too. Unlike our fireball, the Tatsu has different properties depending on which kick button we use. Short will go a short distance and only do so much damage and hit so many times. Forward goes farther and does more damage, and roundhouse does the same from here. Keep in mind that further and stronger isn't always better though. Remember the frame data? If we look, we can see that the Tatsu has lots of recovery frames, more than enough for a good player to punish us for recklessly using it. It's also minus on block, 7 frames to be exact. This means that if Chun-Li blocks our roundhouse Tatsu, then she's going to have 7 extra frames to hit us with anything that she would like to before we're able to block again. A good player is going to take advantage of this, and they're going to pick a fast enough move to punish us. This makes Ken's Tatsu, at least on the ground, not very useful. His Tatsu does have one very useful tool, but we'll cover that soon. Lastly, the DP. This kinda tends to be the tricky one for people who are new to Street Fighter. The motion is forward, down, down forward, and a punch button. This is actually going to be the first time that we learn a shortcut to get a special move out a little bit easier. However, make sure you also try to learn how to do this using forward, down, and down forward. It'll come in handy later. The easiest way to DP is just to press the direction that you want to do a DP, and then do a fireball motion. This is the most basic example of a move that's considered an anti-air, that being a move that could potentially be good at hitting someone who's in the air. Just like Tatsu, the DP has a bunch of different properties on each button that all have their own different uses. Jab DP is probably the most commonly used and is the safest DP to just throw out. Strong DP rises higher and does slightly more damage. It can also hit 2 times in one DP. Fierce DP goes even higher and can potentially do more damage, but it's divided into 3 hits and it's drastically less safe. Against certain characters, you run the risk of hitting with only 1 hit of this DP, which, even though it can connect, may still leave you open to a counterattack if you can't connect the consecutive hits of the DP. Just like every other special move, if you end up changing sides of the screen, you're going to have to mirror your directions. Almost every special move in Third Strike has an EX version as well. EX specials are modified versions that require a little bit of your super meter to use, but come with different and sometimes useful properties. If you have enough meter to use an EX move, you'll actually see the bar start to flash. Some EX special moves do more damage, some start up faster, and some even let your character be invincible for a small amount of time. EX specials are done by doing the same special attack motion, but hitting 2 of whatever button the special move needs. One thing to note is it doesn't matter which 2 buttons you hit in a row. If you want an EX Fireball, you can hit Jab and Fierce together, Strong and Fierce, whatever. And while we're talking about motions, let's get into using our super. We picked Super Art 3, Shipu Genrai. Most people just refer to the supers as Super 1, 2, or 3. This will also tell you exactly how to do the super as well. You're forced to pick one when you pick your characters, so you really can't miss it. One important thing to keep in mind though, lots of local arcades that have Third Strike setups on legitimate hardware will be running the Japanese version of the game. The text for the supers will be in Japanese on these super arts. They are all in the same order though, so the best thing you can do is remember which numbered super art is which. The colored numerals are the same in either language. These same numerals show up next to the super meter in the game, so even if you want to watch some old matches from Japanese tournaments, you can tell exactly what super the players are using right from the start of the match. Each super also shows how many meters you can stock up at a time. One of the most useful things about Ken's Super 3 is that it lets Ken store up to 3 supers at a time. While Super 3 is technically the weakest of Ken's 3 super arts in terms of damage, the amount of meter it lets us store away gives us the option of using a bunch of EX moves instead if we wanted to. Unlike Alpha 2, the supers really only have one version for the most part, at least in Ken's case. So the damage and speed will always be the same for that super. For Ken's Super 3, you're going to do 2 of your fireball motions back to back and then hit a kick button. Keep in mind that if our super is blocked, then it won't finish out with all of the ending in-air hits, so we'll be left wide open. Ken's super is also 5 parries, since he won't do the kicks if it's parried too. yeah, parries. Oh, come on, I didn't forget. Parries are the absolute best part of Third Strike. Parries are done by either tapping down or towards your opponent right as their attack is about to hit you. You can either parry high, low, or air parry. Some things can be parried either high or low. The great thing about parrying as opposed to blocking is that while it's much harder to do, you take 0 damage from the attack that you parry. Parrying oftentimes leaves the opponent in a frozen state, giving you a chance to counterattack, and you'll also have time to make a comeback or punish your opponent for being too predictable. Specifically, it'll freeze both players for 16 frames, but then freeze the parried opponent for a small amount of extra frames on top of that. If your opponent does a move that'll hit multiple times, the entire move will continue regardless of if you parry the first hit and get the freeze. If you parry someone who is attacking from the air, then 2 different things can happen. If they attack from high up and you parry that, they'll have to go through a recovery animation. If they're able to finish this entire animation before they touch the ground, they'll be able to act fast enough to block, parry, attack, whatever they want. If they wait to attack, however, and they can't finish the recovery before they hit the ground, they'll have to go through another small recovery while grounded. And this is your punish opportunity instead. Keep in mind though, not every air parry situation is going to be this cut and dry. Jumping in and parrying, or just parrying someone else's jump in, is kind of one of the basic starters for the mix-up game in Street Fighter. In Third Strike, it's really important to try to play as unpredictably, but as safely as you can at the same time. This means there's a lot more to think about than just, can I get this jump in, can I block it? It has more so to do with, am I going to have to parry when I jump in? Am I going to have to parry a jump in? Which attacks are they jumping in with? Is it a multi-hit attack? Can I attack after I parry? There's gonna be a lot to think about and look for in the moment. In fact, this is probably the best time to make a note for this. If you can probably tell from everything we've done so far, all of these parries have been prediction parries, not reaction parries. A good 99% of all of your parries in Third Strike should be prediction parries. It means that you're going to try to parry something that you know is coming. The difference being, in this same example, if someone is jumping at you and you know that they're going to attack way before an attack even comes out and you parry it, that's a prediction parry. A reaction parry would be either seeing an attack come up on screen and then parrying because you saw that attack, or being hit with a multi-hit attack, parrying the first hit, and then recognizing that you're going to have to parry more because the attack is going to continue. One of the absolute easiest reaction parries in the game is going to be any kind of projectile or fireball. However, it's very important to keep in mind that whoever parried the projectile or the fireball is going to be the person that gets frozen. The person that threw the projectile is just going to finish their animation like normal. Thankfully, most multi-hit parries also follow some kind of rhythm, and lots of attacks kind of share the same rhythm. A unique property about parrying is that if another attack is going to hit you within the next 2 frames of your first parry, the next one is automatically parried. Probably the most unique and useful part of parrying, though, is the way that you can buffer and store inputs. After getting a successful parry, the game will immediately remember and store the last input you've pressed following your parry input. The game will then start that specific attack all by itself as soon as the parry animation ends. This is useful for a few reasons that we'll talk about soon, but more importantly, it might make a couple things a little bit more difficult. Namely, it makes it tempting to use one of the fastest buttons that you have. In this scenario, we're going to use grab. If you're practicing along with the video, here's a word of advice. It's often very tempting to grab after a successful parry, and while grabs in Third Strike are extremely fast and oftentimes useful, understanding that one of the biggest things you want to avoid in this game is forming bad habits. If you instinctively grab every time that you parry, then you'll probably find yourself accidentally grabbing after a high air parry, which then you're giving your opponent the advantage instead. You're also going to want to look out for being overly eager to parry. Lots of new players want to parry stuff as soon as they jump into Third Strike. And I don't blame you, it's the most fun part. But lots of people know to look out for this. Parrying requires that you hit forward or down. So if you always hit forward after you jump in, all your opponent has to do is wait an extra second before they attack. And suddenly they've got a full combo because they know you want to parry. You also can't parry grabs, so you might find yourself just getting grabbed over and over instead. However, if you want to, you can just cancel out of a parry directly into a block, or another parry if that's what you absolutely need to do. Cancels, or canceling, is doing an action that will stop the last animation that we started. There are normal cancels, self-cancels, like some of our chains, special cancels, and super cancels. Ken's standing and crouching, jab, strong, and fierce are all both special and super cancelable, as well as his low short and low forward. And like we saw, you can also cancel a parry into a block. This is kind of the rock and a hard place of learning third strike. You really want to parry everything, but sometimes you just need to block. If you ever want to learn, you're gonna have to parry and you're gonna have to mess it up to get better. Again, just focus on trying to build good habits. If you're absolutely certain that you can parry something, or if you can at least get close, go for it. But if your confidence starts to go down, there's no shame in just switching to block if you have the health to spare. Although, at least for now, until we get to some more advanced stuff, that kind of covers all of the general basics for the whole game. Let's jump into some Ken specific stuff, doing some combos. Let's just go for the easiest one first, Ken's target combo. For Ken, it's standing, strong, fierce. Our target combo, or any character's target combo, is usually a series of moves that are specifically designed to link into each other. Usually something developer intended. Remember that Stand Strong has two different versions depending on the distance, so you'll have to get close for this to work. Got it? I'm sure you've seen it already. You'll know if something is a legitimate combo or not based on whether the combo counter comes up. That's the really easy stuff though. Let's mix in a special. A really common one to know is Strong Fierce into Fireball. Strong naturally cancels into Fierce, but Standing Close Fierce is also special cancelable. This means we can go from Fierce into any of our specials without worrying about any specific link timing. Outside of extending our combo potential, doing this fireball can give us more distance between us and our opponent. However, a regular fireball leaves us minus 11 on block. This means that our opponent might be able to punish us. Our Close Fierce is only minus 2 on block, however. So usually it's much safer to just stop following through with our combo as soon as we notice the Close Fierce has been blocked. However, stopping at Fierce won't create very much distance between us and our opponent. In some cases, it might be a good idea to throw an EX Fireball here instead. EX Fireball is -6 on block, so it's a good middle ground between Fierce and a regular Fireball. And if it does hit, it also causes a knockdown. If you have some extra meter to burn, and you're going to go for a risky Fireball on block anyway, EX Fireball is definitely the way to go in most cases. This is where you can start to pick up on some easy, practical confirms. Another common combo is Strong, Fierce, Jab DP. Strong DP doesn't do a very good job of connecting, and Fierce DP will connect with some characters, but it doesn't follow through with a knockdown, so it'll usually just leave us open. If we follow through with the DP, and if our Strong Fierce is blocked, we're asking to get hit on the way back down. Just try to time your DPs well, and if you do, it's a really easy high damage link. If you have your opponent in the corner, you can sometimes DP twice in a row with good timing. However, getting 2 DPs in the corner like this is actually dependent upon which character you're fighting. That's really specific stuff, and we're definitely going to talk about it, but I got a couple more combos I want to show you first. Try not to get too overwhelmed with the character-specific stuff right now, especially if you're just starting out. Strong Fierce DP, even without the second one, is already really good damage, so just focus on making sure you can confirm into that DP. If you've got just that down to muscle memory, then you can start working on how exactly to link the 2 DPs. One quick note, Ken's EX Tatsu is a lot more versatile than it looks. This is that special tool that we were talking about earlier. Specifically, if it's well timed, you can hit the opponent coming down from the air, and typically standing forward will link as soon as you land. If you get the hit, there's a chance that you can do either a DP or a standing fierce if you aren't sure which way you're going to be facing. Also, keep in mind, all of these EX Tatsus we're doing, they're specifically coming from the air. Most Ken players almost never use grounded EX Tatsu. It's just really not all that safe, and it's not worth the damage that you get if you do actually pull it off. It's just so much safer, and there's a lot more guaranteed damage if you do hit from an air Tatsu. Plus, if your opponent tries to challenge an air Tatsu and they go for a parry, that's not the easiest thing in the world either, and 9 times out of 10, you either end up even or in a safe position. So next up, we're gonna start doing some big damage. We're gonna mix in some of those supers. But one thing I do wanna note before we move on, if this is your first time playing Third Strike, or if this is even just your first fighting game, take your time, go back, practice these inputs. If you don't get them right away, that's fine. Things like this take a little bit of time to learn, so take your time and just practice for a little while if you have to. If you're feeling up to it, let's go ahead and add on to something that we've already learned. Next up on the list is Ken's Standing Strong Fierce Fireball Super. And with it, we've got one more shortcut to learn. If you remember from when we talked about cancels, you'll remember that our Standing Fierce is special and super cancelable, but our Fireball is also super cancelable. Now, it probably goes without saying, all of the extra quarter circles you have to do to literally do all of this is a little bit excessive. A quarter circle for the Fireball and then 2 more for the super, it's just a little bit too much. This is where our next shortcut comes in. If you do Standing Strong Fierce and then Fireball, that quarter circle that you use for Fireball can also act as the first quarter circle that we need for our super. This means we only need to use 1 quarter circle to super. So it's Standing Strong Fierce, quarter circle for Fireball, and then 1 more quarter circle and a kick button for our super. Just to be super clear, if you do Standing Strong Fierce and immediately go into super, that combo is going to do quite literally 1 point of extra damage compared to Strong Fierce Fireball super, but adding the extra Fireball in between only costs us that 1 point of extra damage less, and it makes it much easier to confirm into super. Also, if you're looking at the frame data or just outside sources, you might see that our EX Fireball is also super cancelable. This is actually true, but remember that our EX Fireball causes a knockdown. So if we use EX Fireball and then super, not only is it going to waste more meter, but it's going to do less damage since it doesn't allow us to connect the ending portions of our super. This might actually take a little bit of time to get the timing down to muscle memory, and that's fine, especially if this is your first fighting game and all that. Remember, if we do our super and our opponent blocks it, we're left wide open for a counterattack. I know it's tempting to act fast and go through the entire combo as soon as we hit with the first strong, but if we're too reckless and it's blocked, we lose a whole bar of meter and we're gonna get hit. I know it might sound strange, especially if you've been practicing, but sometimes one of the best things you can do in Third Strike is just slow down. Oftentimes, in order to combo some of these normals or specials or supers, you don't actually have to input every button as fast as you can. This will also help you with those confirms, since taking your time with your inputs and only using the amount of time needed between button presses will eventually help you decide whether or not it's safe to do the super or the special. This combo only works if it hits high though. What if we want something that hits low? One of Ken's most commonly used confirms is either short jab, short super, Or short super. Ken short absolutely has to be blocked or parried low to be avoided. So if our opponent is only holding back and not down and back, this is a guaranteed hit. They do each have their own individual uses though. Ken's jab can either be blocked or parried high or low, so starting with short will allow us to connect the jab as long as short hits. The reason why these two different styles of connecting this super is important is because typically you can connect 3 shorts before you super, but depending on what character you're fighting,
Are you ready? Go!
You're only going to be able to connect 2 shorts before you're too far away, so instead, if we need 3 hits to confirm beforehand, we're going to have to do short jab short. Now obviously, depending on your skill set, this one might be a little bit more difficult for you than some of the other combos, since you're going to have to time in those 2 quarter circles immediately after these much faster attacks. But if you need the practice, there's 2 little pieces of advice that I can tell you. Hit short once, and on your second short, put in 1 quarter circle. If you see the first or second short connect, then you can put in your second quarter circle and then hit your other short. Try to be as restrictive as you can about how many and when you're putting in these quarter circles. Otherwise, instead of just trying to apply this in a real match with a real person, which I definitely do recommend, the best way to practice this by yourself is just to go into a port that has a training mode, set the training dummy to randomly block, and then only follow through with the super when you are absolutely certain that you've seen or heard the dummy get hit. Just like anything else in life, it's all about just practicing and developing that muscle memory. It'll take some time, but just keep it up, keep practicing, and you'll get it in no time. Next, we're going to go into a few more technical combos and links. If you're ready to move on, then let's keep going. Your command forward can actually link into a super. But it's a very, very small window to link. You'll know if you've done it right by the full combo counter. Ken's universal overhead can also link into super. But this one is specific to the distance away from your opponent. For almost every character, their overhead slightly moves them forward during its active frames, so we want to take advantage of that. It's going to hit low blocking opponents regardless of the distance, so what we want is for the overhead to hit as low and as far forward as possible. This puts us on the ground sooner and our opponent stunned at a better time for us. Keep in mind that these two aren't cancels. You're just gonna have to learn the timing naturally. While this next one is honestly really easy and simple to execute, I'm putting it here since it's often misused. Ken's low forward is one of his absolute best confirms directly into his third super. Since it's garnered this reputation, lots of new players will gravitate towards doing low forward and then going straight into super regardless of if it's blocked. Lots and lots of veteran players know to look for this. These people have been parrying Ken's low forward for longer than some of us have been alive. They are going to be looking for that leg. One of the most useful things about Ken's low forward is how far it reaches. It isn't the longest low forward in the game, that award goes to Akuma, but it's very good. But that's great for us, since it allows us an easy way to whiff punish. If you don't remember, whiff punishing is reacting to our opponent throwing out a move that won't hit us, then hitting them while in the middle of their animation. For example, Makoto can get lots of high damage combos out of her command grab. If you see the Makoto player dash in a lot to grab, it might be a good idea to just put a low forward out, as she has an extremely long forward dash to compensate for her slow walk speed. If she does, she'll run right into your leg and you're free to super. This makes it an extremely useful poking tool, if nothing else. Poking being just that, getting bits of damage here and there with single hits instead of combos. The point is that just like with our parrying, one of the last things that we want to do is build bad habits in this game. Bad habits hurt a lot, and it's really hard to break out of them in some cases. Try to use low forward as a whiff punishing tool, or a poking tool instead of just going right into super at first. It'll be much easier to confirm into super after you've had time to acclimate to the speed and flow of the game, and after you've got some matchup experience fighting a bunch of different characters. Okay, big finish. This is probably the one that you've been waiting for. Jumping roundhouse, low forward, strong DP, super. There's a few key points to this combo that I can give you to try to step you through this a little bit easier. Jump in roundhouse is going to be easier to time than neutral roundhouse, but it's good to learn both. Once you hit the ground, try not to be too eager with doing the DP. Give yourself ample time to do your low forward. It's easy to hit forward too fast, which in some situations means that your opponent has enough time to block the incoming DP. Next, we can combine the two shortcuts that we've learned. For starters, we're going to use the fireball shortcut version of our DP motion in order to limit how many quarter circles we have to do to get the super out. But by using this shortcut, there's a couple extra tricks along the way that we also get from this. Let's go ahead and break it all down. So in this specific situation, where Ken is on the right side of the screen, when we jump, we're going to press left as we're falling down. This left input is actually going to act as the first input of our DP motion. Then, when we hit the ground, we're going to hit down and then forward to do our low forward. But this down input for low forward is also going to count as the down input that we need for our DP motion. So now after we hit low forward, all we have to do is follow up with the rest of the fireball motion for our DP and then hit strong. And then after that, if the strong DP connects, we can do one more quarter circle and a kick button for our super. So from start to finish, while we're in the air, we're gonna hit left and then roundhouse for our in-air roundhouse kick. We're going to hold down and then hit forward to start our low forward. Follow through with the fireball motion and then hit strong punch for our DP. And then if all that connects, we're gonna follow through with one more fireball motion and a kick for our super. So just like how doing a fireball or the shortcut DP version of the move will let us cheat that extra quarter circle into our super, doing this shortcut DP motion, we can kind of cheat all the extra moves that we need in between this one motion, while also cheating out that extra quarter circle that we need for the super. And listen, for 2 seconds, hear me out. This is a cool combo. I like this combo. I love doing this combo. But please understand that this is a very high risk, high reward combo. In most cases, this is not really the best option to go for if you really want to link a super. However, knowing this combo and practicing this combo is a pretty good exercise in execution. Learning this combo start to finish is going to kind of help you instill that thought process of, okay, I need to do all of these buttons and motions, but I don't have to do them as fast as I humanly can. I can space things out in between and the whole thing still comes out and connects. If you're having trouble doing this start to finish, just chunk it out one piece at a time. If you can't get the DP to come out to low forward, just do jump roundhouse and low forward and make sure it connects into a real combo. If you're having trouble with low forward and a DP, just do low forward DP. Omit the jump and the super. If you can't get your DP to link in a super, well, you get it by now. Just practice each bit at a time. But if you're ready to move on again, there's a couple more things we need to talk about. This is going to be the last thing we're going to touch on before we get to some of the complex vocabulary. Cross-ups. A cross-up is when you hit your opponent from one side while they're still facing the other. A cross-up can also just be considered switching sides with a jump, whereas a cross-under can just be switching sides by purposefully moving underneath the opponent. Ken has an extremely versatile cross-up on his jumping forward. The big positive is that we can connect almost any of our previous combos out of this. Cross-up, short jab, short super. Cross-up, strong, fierce, fireball super. Cross-up, strong, fierce, jab, DP. And a bunch more. Sound a little less like a foreign language yet? All of these things are great tools to add to your Ken toolbox and help improve your mix-up game as much as you can. And just in case that needs any explaining, mix-ups are just that, putting your opponent in a situation where they'll have to guess what you're going to do next. If you just walk up to your opponent and do the same thing over and over in any fighting game, it should be kind of obvious why that's not a great idea. Your opponent's gonna see it coming from a mile away. Especially so in Third Strike, where one good parry is all it takes to knock off half a health bar in some cases. So at this point, we know a bunch of things about Third Strike now. We know all of our basic movement options for getting around the screen. We know just about every method of avoiding attacks. We've used all of our buttons and we've looked up what their potential might be. We even know a few solid combos. At this point, before we go on to the next section, I would recommend that you take some time to practice what we've done here so far, and more importantly, play a couple real games. If you're able to, play with a friend for a few sets before moving on to the next section. Local is always going to be better than online for fighting games, but online works just fine too if that's what you want to do instead. If you're not feeling super confident about your play just yet, that's totally fine too. Maybe back out and try your hand at some arcade mode for a round or two. Just something to let you start getting around the stage and trying to figure out some stuff against a moving opponent. If you're ready to learn a little bit more though, stick with me for just a little bit longer. We're going to get into some deeper stuff next. Everything coming up in this next section is either going to be more complex technical physical mechanics of Third Strike, or what some people might like to refer to as Theory Fighter, things that are a little bit more nuanced in concept with Street Fighter in general. Okay, let's start from square one, specifically from the round start. You might have seen some matches before where each player just kind of shuffles about in place for a little while. In a very, very general sense, this is what people refer to as the neutral game. The neutral game is a very broad topic and a very broad concept. Every character is going to have their own specific style of neutral game. But really, generally speaking, the neutral game is just a point in the match or in a game where neither player has an advantage over the other, but they're doing specific actions, moves, or just trying to specifically position themselves to a point where they will have an advantage. Essentially, that shuffling is the players positioning themselves to be able to gain the most distance and stay in a safe spot while they do it. And this is also true on players just randomly crouching. You may see this a bit if you play against other people when you pick Ken. Like we've discussed, Ken's low forward super has garnered a pretty big reputation for being both extremely good in the right hands and extremely abused in the wrong hands. People might instinctually mix in a down input here and there when they're close to you, anticipating a low forward and waiting for the parry advantage. Among third strike players, you'll usually hear this referred to as buffering a parry, or if you want a way to think about it differently, it's kind of like you're storing a move inside of a parry. The way that parries work in third strike is that any button or move that you use following a parry, the game is going to remember that button or motion and then make that happen as soon as the parry is over. If I'm playing as Ken, almost every time that I do strong fierce in the hopes of doing a combo, I'm probably going to want to either tap forward or down before I do it, just in case they try to hit me with something. So that way I can automatically parry it, and then my next move automatically comes out afterwards. Looking at a different example, let's take a look at the neutral game for Makoto again. Since we're Ken, you may see people refer to this as a Shoto matchup, since characters like Ryu, Ken, and Akuma share common specials like the Hadoken and Shoryuken. So they're under the Shoto umbrella despite playing drastically different in this game. Since Makoto doesn't have any projectiles to throw at us, we're really just looking out for those physical attacks and those lightning fast approaches. So instead of wobbling back and forth, we might throw in an extra fireball instead, just in case she decides to dash punch, or dash up to us trying to grab. If you play a character that has a lot of projectiles, or you're just someone who uses a lot of projectiles, you may say that your neutral game heavily relies on zoning, the act of keeping a lot of distance between you and your opponent. Keeping this kind of distance, or even in small moments in between, like when you have Oki, you can also whiff normals. Okizeme, or just Oki for short, means that since your opponent still has to wake up, and you can still move, you can continue applying pressure as soon as they're able to act. Most buttons will work, but almost every character has a specific button or normal that is really good for building meter while you're not doing anything else. Whipping normals is very common for characters that heavily rely on using their meter. It's not exactly like it's a bad thing for any character to have more meter, but still. The neutral game can change depending on the characters. Thus is the reason for breaking down specific matchups. If your playstyle, or if the character you're fighting just requires more close quarter strategy, then usually you would refer to this kind of fighting style as using footsies. For instance, if you were to see or hear somebody say, wow, that player has a really great footsie game, basically they're saying they know when to play defensively when they need to, and they know how to react and respond appropriately to those high-pressure situations. Footsies is that shuffling back and forth you might see during high-level third strike matches, where each player is trying to position themselves appropriately to put themselves at an advantage. Almost every matchup in the game is going to require some level of footsie play. Footsies is key to playing some good third strike. Just stay sharp, look for your moment, and wait your turn. Combos will come to those who footsie. A big aspect of a solid neutral game and good footsie play is throwing out some bait and trying to condition your opponent. This is a really basic example, but it should make sense right off the bat. So as Ken, our taunt is going to give us a small attack buff towards our next attack or combo. A really common scene is to taunt after you knock down the other person into the corner, since you'll get Okizeme. This is also a good opportunity to do meaties, meaning attacks you can throw out while they're knocked down, and as soon as they're able to get hit, our active frames are already right on top of them. So we knock them down, we get them in the corner, and we taunt. Assuming our opponent knows what our taunt does, you can assume that they're expecting you to an attack, since you want to do some damage. This is our bait. If we did decide to attack after the taunt, their options are block, parry, or maybe counterattack in time. Counterattacking is risky, so we can assume that there's a very small chance they'll go for that. So we're expecting either a block or a parry. Since they're expecting us to attack, how about we don't? Is it cheap? I mean, yeah, maybe, but it works. Even throwing dynamite is a martial art somewhere. Sure, the taunt doesn't buff our throw damage, but we still got some good damage since we baited a block using our taunt. We conditioned our opponent to press the buttons we wanted them to press. That's a really small part of mind games and building up some of those Street Fighter fundamentals. And that's all well and good, but how about some actual physical techniques in Third Strike? Moving on. Here's something that you can add to your tools and you should be using every single time you super with Ken and most other characters. The piano. If you've been following along with the video, practicing watching my inputs, then you might have already seen this once or twice in examples. For a little context to this one, throw a fireball with jab and then hold the button down. Wait just a couple seconds just for the example. Now do another fireball motion and release the button. The fireball still comes out. This is something called negative edge, a weird property that some fighting games have that allow for supers and specials to come out with both the press and the release of a button. So now, let's do our super motion and walk our fingers across all of the kicks, like you would tap your hands if you're waiting around for something. So when we do this, we're actually giving the game 6 opportunities to have the super come out, instead of just the 2 with one button press. This way, if you happen to tap the button for a super a little early or a little late, the extra inputs kind of give you a physical buffer to make up for it. Keep in mind, this is really best only used for supers. If you try to piano a special, you'll most likely just end up with either a version of the special you didn't want, or an EX. You also shouldn't piano supers with characters like Makoto using Super 2, or Urien with Super 3. Since their super changes based on which button was used for the activation. Next, we can add a little bit more to our throw game too. Third Strike has what's known as Kara throws and Kara canceling. Essentially, what we want to do is activate a move that will change our position and cancel it into a throw on the next frame. Even though it might not really be visible, every character has specific moves that actually change their position on the screen, even if they reset to the original position after the move is over. We want to do a pseudo cancel with that move to get a little bit extra distance. For Ken's Kara, we're going to want to aim to cancel with either crouching forward or crouching roundhouse. In this case, both will give us the same distance forward for our Kara grab, so it's often safer to use crouching forward as to not accidentally throw out a sweep and leave us open if it's blocked. Now this is just my opinion, but that's actually just true for people using stick. If you happen to be using a pad, roundhouse might be the better pick with enough practice, since you have a dedicated finger on trigger for roundhouse, while saving your thumbs for the grab. You can tell if you've gotten the Kara by the shadow underneath Ken. If you grab and he doesn't move at all, no Kara. If you see the shadow nudge forward, there's the Kara. This is really only useful for neutral grab though, so this is really only good for damage and a quick knockdown. The next one's gonna be a little bit more difficult. We're gonna make our DPs a little bit more versatile with a Kara DP. This is gonna do the same thing for us. Nudge our DP a little bit closer to the opponent. This is the only way to get a double DP on a bunch of other characters, and also letting us double DP mid-screen if we wanted to. Ken's DP is an extremely strong move, so getting off more of them is pretty essential to our combo game if we can work it in. For a Kara DP, we're gonna do a very traditional DP motion, just forward, down, and down forward. Except, we're going to hold the down forward when we DP, since we're trying to technically get the Kara roundhouse or Kara forward to come out first. If you remember all the way back from earlier when we first learned DPs, this is why I had said it's good to learn the shortcuts, but it's also very important to make sure you know how to do a traditional DP motion. The best way to tell if you've done the Kara is, well, hitting the second DP. Ken's shadow moves forward after you DP, so otherwise it's kind of hard to tell. This is extremely character dependent though, so not only will you have to memorize who this works on, you'll have to have the execution for it too. Mid-screen, we can do strong or low forward into regular DP, then Kara DP on Necro and Elena. This will also work on cue, and going forward, everything that I list can be done on all of the characters before them as a rule of thumb. Mid-screen, we can do standing fierce DP, Kara DP, on Chun-Li, Makoto, 12, and Necro. Mid-screen, we can also do standing strong or low forward into regular DP Kara DP on Ken, Ryu, Akuma, Sean, Chun-Li, Makoto, 12, and Urien. Those are all of the different combinations for mid-screen. If you can get some of these characters into the corner, however, you can do way less work. Standing strong fierce into double DP with no Karas at all will work on Ken, Ryu, Akuma, Sean, Chun-Li, Makoto, 12, Urien, and Elena. Strong Fierce DP into Kara DP will work on Remy, Ibuki, and Hugo in the corner, as well as everyone before them. And lastly, Fierce into Jab DP, Kara DP will work on Yun, Yang, and Oro in the corner. I know that's a lot to remember right off the bat, but don't feel like this is something that you have to master and memorize day one. Timing for Kara DPs are pretty rough. I still miss them more often than I'd like to admit. The absolute best thing that you can do when you're starting out is just wait to try a double DP with Karas until you have whoever you're playing against in the corner. If you miss the Kara, the regular DP still has enough of a chance to connect for a double on a majority of the cast, just in case you can't remember the character specifics. This will help you work on your double DP timing in general in the meantime. And if you miss a Kara, you can at least have enough recovery time to block in most cases. You miss out on a good Oki opportunity to apply some wake-up pressure if you miss, but you gotta make those bets sometimes to grow. Still with me? We're just about at the end of it. Just a few more things and we'll wrap this up. So we got a new throw, we got a new DP. How about a new parry? Red parries, to be exact. Red parries are a type of parry that can only be done after a block, and the window is much smaller to get it. Regular blue parries have roughly a 7-frame window to parry when being attacked. A red parry has 3 frames for normals and only 2 frames for supers.
Which in not robot speak means that's gonna be hard. Red parries, that's really hard.
However, they're not impossible. Here's 2 of the best ways to practice red parries and actually learn something along the way. Block Ken standing strong, red parry the fierce. That's the normal window. For specials, block the first hit of EX Fireball, red parry the second. For supers, I recommend parrying Q's first super art. This will let you practice both high and low red parries. Q's Super 1 has a very easy rhythm, both on block and when parried. For red parrying high, honestly, just pick any punch that you want, whatever you're the most comfortable with. The super rhythm is slow enough to where you should be able to pick this one up pretty easy. For lows, block the first 3 and red parry the 4th. And while you're here, you may as well practice parrying the whole super. It's one of the easiest in the game to learn next to the fireballs, and it just feels great to get the whole thing and go into a big combo punish. Red parrying is really only used for big punishes if you know exactly what's coming and exactly when it's coming. Or, and more commonly so, if you're walking the line of dying from chip damage, you may as well just try and red parry.
If it's your last chance for survival and you were just gonna die to chip damage anyway, you may as well just go for it.
Next, the DED or dead option select. For starters, an option select is known as basically telling the game to do multiple things or creating a situation where multiple things can happen, but only getting one result that hopefully puts you in the best position possible. In this case, this is a method that will help us guarantee that we'll do super after we land our low forward. When we fill our meter, we want to stop just short of a full bar for this. So our super meter right now is filled up just enough to not quite have a full bar in order to let us do our super. So if we walk up to Chun while she's blocking and low forward, and then immediately do our super when we don't have enough bar, since our low forward was blocked, it didn't give us enough meter to actually have enough to super anyway. So now, if we build up our super meter by whipping some normals just a little bit more and get it to about the same exact amount, and then we go up to Chun-Li while she isn't blocking, we gained a little bit more meter because our low forward did connect, which means that we got just enough meter for the super to come out automatically. This is the goal of the DED option select. We build up just enough bar to where if our next attack is blocked, the super that we put in doesn't come out at all. but if the attack does hit, we get just enough meter and the super connects automatically. You can do this with other attacks as well. I just use low forward for this example since it's a common move to use for the reach. And finally, to finish off, the SGGK option select. This is a combination of different things, and thus will hopefully counter a bunch of different situations. The idea behind the SGGK is to set up for a bunch of damage options, but also to take advantage of how parries treat our inputs. Let's break down a scenario so it's easier to understand. So we're Ken, and we're gonna walk up to Chun here. We're going to press down in anticipation for a parry, but also pressing down to Kara throw. After you hit all the buttons for your Kara throw, do the motion for super if you have the meter to buffer your inputs in. If Chun doesn't do anything, we nail the throw. If Chun also tries to throw us, we tech her throw. If she tries to go for a low attack, we parry automatically and the low forward comes out instead of the throw. Since we buffered in our super inputs, all we have to do is piano the kicks and we've gotten a safe, free parry into super punish. This works because we have to hit down before the throw to Kara throw. But if we parry something along the way, the parry only saves and uses the very first input that happened after the parry, this being our low forward. The only real thing that can be done here by Chun to avoid all of this is for Chun to just back up and not get Kara thrown in the very start. If she does do this, then the worst thing that happens is you get punished during your throw animation. But remember, throws are pretty fast, it's kind of unlikely. But all in all, this is a really versatile technique. Do nothing, get thrown. Block us, also get thrown. Throw us, we tech it. Attack us, we parry it low, the attack automatically comes out, we buffer in the super, and we get a free punish. Whew, well, that's what I got. We've covered all the basics for Street Fighter in general. We've learned a lot of Ken specific things, some Third Strike specific things. We've gotten some really great combos under our belt. We even snuck some advanced stuff into there. I'm coming up on like 70 pages of the script and I'm dying. But really, in all seriousness, I really hope that was helpful if you're picking up Third Strike for the first time. Or if Third Strike or 30th Anniversary is actually your first fighting game. I know I've said this once or twice in between, but don't feel like you have to learn and master all this stuff right away. The reason there are so many old hats that are as good as they are today is because they've been playing for years and they never stop playing. Everyone's got flaws, and it takes everyone time to learn. Hell, I've been playing this game for years and I still fall for dumb stuff every now and again. The absolute best thing you can do in Third Strike is just practice and play people. Training mode is definitely your friend in this game, more so for learning about those parry timings and getting your execution just right. But obviously that's not gonna mean anything unless you can do that to real people. So what should you do from here? If you're looking for more resources on matchups and you wanna see some great play, I can't recommend the Shend enough. The Shend has been collecting and archiving match footage for Third Strike for longer than I care to comfortably know about, just enough to be a little jealous over. They have hundreds and hundreds of videos on their channel. Yeah, some of the quality is a little rough for some, but again, this is an old game. The fact that the Shend is able to source and re-upload these old matches, some of which being from literal VHS tapes, is a miracle in and of itself. They also have a Patreon that you can check out and support at even the most basic tier. It gets you access to their database of match footage. Not everything from the database is on YouTube, so not only is it good for the niche games, but also it neatly sorts all the matches by events and lists the matchups. If you're looking only for matchups with X or Y player or X and Y character, this is the place to go for legacy matches. And I guess that I should probably mention, because I didn't think to do it until now, I'm not affiliated with the Shend. I don't know the person that runs the Shend's YouTube page. I am a member of their Patreon, I do support it, but I'm just throwing it in here because it is such a great resource, and I really do appreciate what they're doing. The Shend doesn't have any idea that I'm even talking about them in this video. They don't even know that this video is a thing at the time of me making this. They've made an amazing resource for players. I love the cause, and I just want to support it. It's really just as simple as that. If you're looking for specific player names to see some good play with each character, here are some of my recommendations. This isn't a final end-all be-all list, just some good names that you should definitely see if you're interested in the character there. As far as who else to watch, I do have some recommendations, and I have a list of people that I do want to talk about. Just understand that at the time of making this video, that is when all of these names I'm going to list are active and relevant. If you're watching this video 3, 4, 5 years into the future, this list may be a little bit different. Feetwork 101, Frankie BFG, Frankie 3S, or Mr. Third Strike, debatably America's best player and is currently making some great stuff over at the Feetwork 101 channel. His Third Strike Film Room series goes over some really subtle things and a lot of great players' mindsets. Keep a lookout for all those names when you're looking up match footage too. If you're looking for live streams, here's a few more I can throw out. To start off, Venkabot. Currently, Third Strike takes up a massive portion of Venkabot's stream schedule. He regularly features new players jumping in, playing online in 30th anniversary, so not only is he using the newest version out, so it's easily accessible to new players, but he encourages new players to hop in and start learning for themselves. And since it takes up a big chunk of his schedule, there's always going to be Third Strike content there. Scrub Series is a great one too. This is actually a local scene out in Wisconsin that hosts Third Strike every Sunday. These guys started with nothing and no one, and now have a super healthy local with real arcade hardware. Honestly, these guys should be inspirations to people that don't have a local community. If you could ever get them to stop playing Melty, super entertaining bunch. And Araki Third Strike, streamed from Game Studio Cube, an arcade in Japan. Or is it Cube? Cube?
Cube.
Well, alrighty then. It's streamed from an actual arcade, so they aren't super interactive in the stream, but when you're talking about watching good Third Strike play, you can't not mention Japanese players. I'm gonna be a little bit biased here and mention some of my local spots, but I literally would not be making this right now if it wasn't for these guys, so... Lost Ark Video Games. Lost Ark is a Japanese-inspired arcade based out of Greensboro, North Carolina. Lost Ark, in collaboration with a player named Flannel Jack and under Flannel Jack's event handle TND, regularly hosts Third Strike sessions every Thursday at Lost Ark. TND's big project, at least at the time of this coming out, is the Lost Ark Legacy series. These tournaments are almost always streamed on the Lost Ark Twitch, and not only features some really great Third Strike play, but Lost Ark is a powerhouse of knowledge for old fighting games. TND is all about bringing in new players and showing them the ropes. All you gotta do is show up. Currently, the Lost Ark Legacy also makes a time slot specifically for a no veterans Third Strike tournament. This means that if you want to go ahead and jump into a bracket right away, you don't really have to worry too much about immediately fighting someone who's been playing Third Strike for actual decades. Although, if you do decide to come and enter this, make sure you enter the regular Third Strike tournament too. You're not really going to learn anything if you don't fight the good players. Fight the new players, fight the middle players, fight the higher players, fight the better players, fight everyone. Just fight everyone. TND has also worked with Carolina Clash, another North Carolina monthly, to bring 3S to more places, so keep an eye on them in the future. It's getting a little age on it at this point, but the Shend has a great Google map that consists of a bunch of local spots specifically to play Third Strike. Some are arcades, some are locals set up at a venue, and some are just some guys who have arcade cabinets in their garage. If you've got a Third Strike scene yourself, even if it's just 3 people playing every Saturday, make it a solid schedule and get in touch and put it on the map. This is just a springboard though. If you live somewhere like, Montana, the map can at least be a good jumping off point for you. Speaking of which, we have a board. We just learned how to play. Why don't we go pay him a visit? But how are we gonna play an arcade board at a fighting game event?
Well, we'll just give this a try. Okay. There we go. Oh, Jesus. We're just gonna leave that be. Okay. How did I even get it in here? This is brutal. Okay. Oh. There we go. It's still going.
Hee-ho!
Alright. Just that.
Hee-ho?
Alright, that's not too bad. Okay. How did I get it in here? Now. Okay, that's not too bad. There we go. I'm taking the purple. Hold on. Okay. No, just stop right there. That's a little excessive. Probably gotta be a better way to do this. How about we make something like this? Let's bring the arcade to them.